So, welcome to Walking Wednesday. This is our walking workshops that happen every second Wednesday of the month from 12 to 12:30. If you can't join us live, no worries. You're probably listening to the recording of this. I'm Kirsten Philpott. I'm your Salt Lake County Employee Wellness Health Educator, and I'll be the one that hosts each of these sessions currently. Walking Wednesdays are all about movement. So there's no slides or participation required beyond simply just listening in. If you have questions, you're welcome to throw them in the chat or to unmute yourself. But think of this as a live podcast where you can simply press play, listen, and move. Our goal is simple: get you moving during the next 30 minutes. So whether you're walking at your desk, bouncing on a yoga ball, stretching, or walking around your building, we just want you to be active. I'll be on my desk treadmill, so if you see me bobbing up and down, that's why. Or if you hear me a little bit out of breath. So just grab your headphones and let's get moving. So just like our last workshop, today's session is inspired by questions you've submitted anonymously. As I mentioned last month, I try to group similar questions together to make the workshops more focused and easier to follow rather than jumping around between topics. So if today's question sparks any thoughts or new questions for you, at the end of the workshop, I'll add a link to a survey where you can just input your questions. And that way I know what you each want to hear about each month. So for this month, received a lot of questions. Nutrition, eat for specific conditions. However, since everyone's body and needs are unique, I want to focus on two particular approaches that complement each other well and can also support a variety of chronic conditions. These two approaches are our blood sugar conscious and anti-inflammatory ways of eating. I prefer not to use the word diet, as I believe all foods have a place in our lives, and I never want to exclude any options for anyone. So, as we explore these two ways of eating, please just remember that nutrition is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Every person's body responds differently to foods, and there are many factors, right, such as genetics, environment, stress, socioeconomic status, and so much more that impact our mental and physical health. And so nutrition is just one part of a much bigger picture. But with that in mind, let's dive into this blood sugar conscious way of eating. To get started, I want to talk about insulin. So insulin is a hormone that's secreted by the pancreas that helps control your blood sugar. Think of insulin like a key that unlocks your cells so they can take in sugar from your blood and convert it into energy. When you become insulin resistant, your cells don't respond to the insulin as well as they should. So they can't take in as much sugar. It's like you're trying to unlock a door to your cells, but the key doesn't fit and you're stuck with the wrong one. As a result, your blood sugar levels rise. So to try and fix this, your pancreas starts producing more insulin. However, this overproduction of insulin doesn't solve the problem, and instead it just makes the resistance worse. This creates a vicious cycle where your body keeps making more insulin to try and lower your blood sugar. But then in the beginning, your body can't tell if you're living in a state of insulin resistance or not. And so because of this, your pancreas is very good at working overtime, and it floods your bloodstream with more insulin. But eventually your pancreas will start to run out of steam and not be able to keep up with the insulin demand. And because the insulin isn't working properly, your blood sugar stays high. And over time, this is what leads to some very serious health conditions. The one that we're probably the most familiar with is type 2 diabetes. But insulin resistance is linked to a variety of health conditions, including chronic inflammation, which can have a cascading effect on heart disease, stroke, cancer, arthritis, Alzheimer's, etc. So there's a lot of health conditions that are very closely linked to insulin resistance. And why does that matter? Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 11.6% of the United States population has type 2 diabetes. And another 38% of the population in the United States is pre-diabetic. So if you put those two numbers together, that means 49% of the population struggles with some form of insulin resistance. And according to the American Association of Diabetes, the causes of insulin resistance are still very much being studied, but research has found that there are genetic risk factors as well as lifestyle risk factors, such as a sedentary life and extra fat in one's bodies. And these lifestyle factors are thought to be an issue due to stress, inflammation, and changes to cellular structure that can increase insulin sensitivity. And as they have studied this extensively, research has shown that the best way to combat insulin resistance is movement and nutrition. So we're not going to focus a lot of time on movement. We did focus our last walking workshop on that. So if that's a topic you're interested in, I encourage you to go listen to the recording of last month's. But basically an oversimplification is when we move our body, it allows the sugar in our bloodstream to bypass the normal insulin receptors on our cells. And having to have those receptors, our sugar can enter directly into our cells and be turned into energy. Recent studies have even shown that by walking for 10 minutes after a meal, we can drastically change our blood sugar levels and also aid in digestion. So if you can, try and make sure you're getting up and moving your body daily in some form or another. And that will help with the nutrition factor of eating in a blood sugar conscious way. Okay, so let's pivot and talk about what this means to eat in a blood sugar conscious way. There's a lot of diets out there that will tell you all the things that you should or should not have. And being a certified intuitive eating counselor, I am just not going to promote those. In fact, I will never promote one diet over another because ultimately you know your body best and you know how certain foods make you feel. However, nutrition is a key part of intuitive eating so that we can make an informed choice. And when it comes to controlling our blood sugar, there are definitely methods that we can use while eating when trying to lower or control those sugars. So the first method, and the one that the American Diabetes Association recommends best, is the plating method. So when you're looking at your plate, envision whether it be your dinner plate or lunch plate or breakfast plate, ideally what you want is half your plate to be non-starchy vegetables, a quarter of your plate to be lean protein, and then a quarter of your plate to be starchy vegetables or fiber-filled carbohydrates or dairy. So what are these non-starchy vegetables that are supposed to fill up 50% of our plate? This is not an exhaustive list, but these are your greens, your beets, your carrots, your cucumbers, your turnips, your rutabagas, your Brussels sprouts, onions, cauliflower, broccoli, and so much more. They're the things that really come to mind when you hear the word vegetables. Those are typically your non-starchy vegetables. Starchy vegetables, or fiber-filled carbohydrates, which fill up 25% of your plate, those are things like potatoes, beans, rice, quinoa, fruit, or anything of that nature. And then the other 25% are that protein, right? So that's going to be your meats, your fishes, your cheeses, your beans, dairy, and things like that. And so while there are many, many more items in each of those groups, I just wanted to give you some of those ideas. But why does it matter? Well, an important method to controlling our blood sugar is food pairing. So when we're looking at the plating method and we're recognizing that 50% is vegetables, 25 is protein, 25 is fiber-filled carbohydrates, What we're really doing there is food pairing. And that food pairing is really important when we're eating. When we pair our carbohydrates, which remember, rule of thumb is if it's a plant or comes from a plant, it's a carbohydrate. When we pair those carbohydrates with a protein, that protein helps slow down the digestion of the carbohydrates, which allows our body more time to absorb the sugar into our bloodstream. This is enhanced even more if our carbohydrates are fiber filled. And so some examples of these pairings could be like whole grain toast with peanut butter or avocado, a salad with chicken, eggs, or fish, lentils or beans with rice and quinoa, or yogurt with berries and nuts. So those are just some ways that we can pair. If you think, okay, yeah, but I don't always eat, right, my food separate, that's totally okay. Just try and envision what it would look like if you separated each of the items. For example, tacos are naturally a really good paired balanced meal, especially if you're using a whole wheat or a corn tortilla and then you load it right with your favorite taco meat and lettuce, salsa, and guacamole. There's going to be protein in there. There's going to be a fiber-filled carbohydrate, and you can load it with a lot of vegetables. And so that's automatically kind of a good pairing. So just to recap, right? So we want to make sure that we're eating enough vegetables. So we're having 50% of our plate vegetables, 25% protein, 25% fiber-filled carbohydrate, and that when we do eat, we're ensuring that we pair a protein with a carbohydrate. Another important step when we're eating to control blood sugars is to make sure we are snacking. If you're a chronic dieter, this can sometimes maybe be a different mindset and a mindset shift. And a lot of it has to do with when we go long periods of time without fueling our body, our blood sugars can start to rise, or they can also start to plummet. It really just depends on how your body reacts. And so it's important when we're regulating our blood sugars that we're eating at regular intervals. Ideally, this is every 2 to 3 hours, with our bigger meals being every 4 to 5 hours apart. And this helps ensure that our blood sugar stays stable rather than rising or falling too quickly. It also helps us recognize when we're actually hungry and when we're full, which can help aid in that intuitive eating process of recognizing our hunger and fullness levels. Another often overlooked step when it comes to controlling blood sugars is making sure that we're drinking enough water. Most adults need between 9 and 11 cups of water a day to maintain bodily functions. This water is dependent on a lot of different factors, so you might need more or less depending on things like weight, activity level, muscle mass, and all of that. The recommended 8 glasses of water that we all grew up hearing about is the least amount of water we can consume without significant decreases in our cognition and our anatomical functioning. So it's really, really important to make sure that we're getting enough water. However, the average American consumes 4 glasses of water a day, 2.5 cups of soda, and 3 cups of coffee. So as a whole, Americans are sorely lacking in their necessary water consumption. To battle this, I recommend setting up a new habit or routine for yourselves where you drink 1 glass of water upon waking, 1 glass of water at each meal, 1 glass of water with every snack, and then 1 glass of water before bed. This will get you to 7 glasses of water a day. So you'll need to find time to ensure that you're drinking at least 1 more to help with necessary bodily functions and sugar regulation. And then as you accomplish that 8 glasses of water, you can start adding in another one and another one to ensure that optimal hydration. And then the last step I want to point out, and also leads us into our next conversation of anti-inflammatory eating. When looking to control blood sugar, it's important to remember that insulin resistance can create a vicious cycle of inflammation in the body. Insulin resistance is correlated to increased body fat. This fat can increase inflammatory markers, which can lead to increased insulin resistance, which can lead to increased body fat, and the cycle repeats. So when we're trying to increase our insulin sensitivity, it's important that we focus on foods that are anti-inflammatory in nature. So let's segue into that anti-inflammatory eating approach. Anti-inflammatory foods are foods that naturally decrease the inflammatory response in our bodies. By prioritizing these foods, we can help to decrease the chronic inflammation we may be struggling with. And once again, remember that this chronic inflammation can be seen in a wide variety of chronic conditions. So if you're struggling with anything with your kidneys or your liver or your thyroid or your heart, or really just basically any chronic condition, that's automatically going to increase your inflammation throughout your body. Because anytime there's something going on within our body tries to fight it with an immune response, which results in inflammation. And so by prioritizing foods that can decrease chronic inflammation, we can help aid in our own recovery and help speed it along. Examples of inflammatory, so these are not anti-inflammatory, these are your inflammatory foods, include things such as red meat, processed meats such as bologna, sausage, or lunch meat, breads and pasta that are made with white flour, deep fried anything, foods high in added sugar such as packaged snacks, candy, syrup, things with a lot of trans fats and saturated fats, specifically those found in like margarine, microwave popcorn, refrigerated biscuits and doughs, and then non-dairy coffee creamers, sugar sweetened beverages such as soda, canned tea, energy and sports drinks. All of those foods can increase the inflammation in our body. And so while that's not an exhaustive list, it kind of gives you an idea of some foods that Americans typically consume that actually can increase the inflammation in our bodies. And so as we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, I want to remind you, I'm not trying to take anything off the table. I recognize that we have lives and many of us are busy and home cooked meals are hard to come by. I also recognize that a lot of anti-inflammatory foods can be much more expensive than others. And from an economic standpoint, it may just simply not be possible to eat the way that we want. So it is definitely a privilege to eat in an anti-inflammatory way. And I want to recognize that. I also recognize that each of us have different taste buds and preferences, and adding certain foods like more vegetables or fruits to our diet can make us not want to eat at all. And that is all valid. So whatever feelings or thoughts or emotions you have as we talk about anti-inflammatory foods, they are valid, they are real. And my goal here is simply to provide education around some sorts of foods. And then you get to choose what to do with that education, 100% guilt. Okay, so back to those anti-inflammatory foods. Step one is limiting the inflammatory foods that I just listed. And now we want to try and add in more anti-inflammatory foods to mitigate that response. While there is no specific anti-inflammatory diet out there, there's a lot of things that we can do to put into our diet that can help. So foods that are rich in omega-3 fatty acids are very powerful inflammation fighters. Omega-3s are especially rich in fatty fish such as salmon, herring, mackerel, sardines, tuna, and anchovies. You can also find omega-3s in plant-based foods such as flax seeds, butternut, chia seeds, walnuts, soybeans, oats, and spirulina. There's also a lot more. So if you could just Google foods with high omega-3s, that can help with inflammatory responses. Another important nutrient that helps us address the wear and tear of cells that result because of inflammation is vitamin C. So foods that are rich in vitamin C are the ones that probably immediately popped into your mind, right? There are citrus fruits, so things like oranges and grapefruits, as well as strawberries, but there are also plenty of vegetables that are also very rich in vitamin C, such as bell peppers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, spinach. Those are great sources of vitamin C to eat as well. And then the last nutrient I want to talk about when we talk about an anti-inflammatory diet are phytonutrients. So phytonutrients are just a way to lump vitamins and minerals together that come from a plant. So when we are eating plenty of fruits and vegetables a day, we are naturally filling our bodies with low inflammatory foods. The goal should be to eat 5 servings of vegetables a day. 5 servings is half a cup cooked or 1 cup raw per serving. And we want to make sure we're adding in variety and color. It's easy to get into a rut when we're meal planning or trying to just grab and go, but making sure that we have a variety offers a greater variety in nutrients and inflammatory fighting abilities. With our fruit, the goal should be 2 to 5 servings of fruit a day. Once again, they offer pretty much the same benefits as vegetables, and so we want to make sure that we're getting a good mix of both. In America, on average, 90% of Americans do not meet the recommended servings of fruit and vegetables. Most adults average about 1.5 cups of vegetables a day. However, if we think back to our plating method we discussed when talking about controlling blood sugars, if each of our meals were 50% vegetables, we could easily hit those recommended portions and also be in line with an anti-inflammatory diet. So if just being given some facts and knowledge around inflammation and blood sugar control feels overwhelming and you don't know where to start, the Mediterranean diet is a great place to start when it comes to getting practical recipes. The Mediterranean diet is a healthy eating pattern based on the traditional foods of countries like Greece, Italy, and Spain. And Greece and Italy both have blue zones, so they are known to have people that live longer and healthier lives than the rest of the world. The Mediterranean diet focuses on fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and healthy fats like olive oil. Fish and seafood are also a very important source of protein in the Mediterranean diet, along with moderate amounts of dairy, poultry, and eggs. Nuts, seeds, and herbs, specifically garlic and oregano, are also key parts of the diet, and red wine is often enjoyed in moderation. The Mediterranean diet is especially beneficial when we pair it with daily movement. So if you're looking for inspiration on not only a low inflammatory meal, but also one that pairs extremely well with blood sugar maintenance, the Mediterranean diet is a great place to start. I always want to mention that when we're looking at food and nutrition, it's important to remember that variety matters. Our bodies are complex and require a variety of nutrients. And when we follow a diet that asks us to cut out or to restrict any of the macronutrients, our body can and will suffer. There's truth in the saying, moderation in all things. Cutting out carbs can and will negatively affect our brain cognition. Not getting enough protein affects your muscles and cellular structure. Healthy fat is key when it comes to protecting your organs as well as cognition. So anytime you cut out a food group, while you may see improvements in some areas, there can be negative impact elsewhere. So please keep that in mind and remember the goal is the rainbow. For those who are interested, we also at Employee Wellness offer health coaching if you want more tailored one-on-one help with your goals. But for today, I want to be conscious of your time. We're almost at that 30-minute mark. And so that is all I have for you today when it comes to food and nutrition. If you have any additional questions or topics you'd like to ask about, please feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat. And then as always, I have a survey. It's linked up on our calendar for the Employee Wellness. And you can always go in, drop your questions in there to make sure that your questions are answered in our Walking Wednesdays. Next month, our topic will align with our March into May. So we will be talking about NASA and space exploration, which will be very fun and very different from what we typically discuss here. But other than that, feel free to unmute yourself or throw in the chat any questions you may have. Otherwise, I'm excited to talk with you next month and have a wonderful Wednesday.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
That was a mistake, sorry.
Oh, no worries. That's okay. If anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we'll chat next month.